The Hotchkiss M201 was the standard light utility vehicle used by the French Army from immediately after World War II until the 1980s, when it was phased out of service. It began as a license-built Willys MB Jeep and remained largely unchanged for the next 40 years. In France, it is commonly referred to simply as Le Jeep. Following World War II, the U.S. Army transferred about 22,000 Willys Jeeps and Ford GPWs to the French government to re-equip their army as quickly as possible. Only about half of the vehicles were serviceable, and the French government agency, the ERGM, was in operation from 1946 to 1956 to put them back in usable condition. The Jeeps that were in the poorest condition were dismantled and used as spare parts. However, this quickly resulted in a huge pool of spare parts that could never be used, and work turned to manufacturing quasi-new Jeeps using the surplus spare parts. These like-new Jeeps were mostly built using reconditioned Willys MB parts, but in the early 1950s, Hotchkiss began producing Willys Jeep components under license in France. Some Willys Overland France parts would have inevitably merged into the pool of vehicle parts, resulting in each vehicle having a unique blend of Willys, Ford, and Hotchkiss components. This has caused a lot of confusion over the identity of many French Army Jeeps. In 1955, Hotchkiss began manufacturing M201 Jeeps under license in France. The M201 was essentially a Willys MB, but was updated over time to make it more reliable and to fix minor flaws, including a stronger radiator, thicker leaf springs, a reworked parking brake, a reinforced cylinder head, a new carburetor, a new water pump, and minor body features. Between 1955 and 1967, 27,628 M201s were constructed, the majority of which were supplied to the French Army. Because the selling price was high, and there were so many second-hand Willys MBs and Ford GPWs on the market at affordable prices, civilian consumer demand was low. Let's step back to 1947 to better understand the origins of the M201. In that year, the French Army announced an ambitious program to replace its World War II Jeeps with a new generation of French-designed and built vehicles, even while the country was suffering from poor economic conditions and shortages. There were several vehicles planned as part of the program. Delahaye took up the creation of a new Jeep while Hotchkiss, their longtime rival, worked on a larger 3/4-ton 4x4 truck. While Hotchkiss' prototype resembled the Dodge truck it replaced, Delahaye's Jeep was a huge technological leap forward. The Delta prototype was developed in 1948 with both military and agricultural markets in mind, and it was ready for inspection the following year. The military version was subjected to several design revisions while being tested between 1949 and 1950. In 1951, the Army adopted the resulting production model and dubbed it the VLRD. Its sophisticated features included an adjustable four-wheel independent torsion bar suspension, a 4-speed synchro mesh transmission with high and low gear ratios and differential locking capability, an aluminum dry sump engine, and a 24-volt electrical system. While the 1951 model represented cutting-edge technology, its sophistication and high performance proved to be a problem. It had survived punishing trials when well-maintained and driven by experienced drivers. The service reality was somewhat different, with breakdowns caused by a lack of adequate maintenance and accidents caused by a lack of adequate driver training. Even the need for a basic driver's instruction manual appears to have been overlooked at first. Poor road holding and differential lock issues were frequently blamed for accidents, but overconfidence and a lack of driver training on the high-performance off-road vehicle were likely contributing causes. Delahaye admitted that the 1951 model had mechanical and quality control issues, which they attempted to correct with the 1953 model. Improvements included a complete redesign of the differential linkage and control system, better seats, and other changes. The Army eventually removed the linkages and rendered the differential locking system inoperable. Most, if not all, VLRDs were likely modified in this manner. However, issues with the overall design and the drivers persisted, so Delahaye began work on designing a completely new vehicle, the COB. The prototype COB was delivered for evaluation in 1954, but was not adopted because the Army questioned the wisdom of using any more overly sophisticated high-performance vehicles. In 1955, the Delahaye company was rescued by Hotchkiss through a merger. All of this played to the advantage of Hotchkiss, who had obtained a license from Willys to manufacture parts and Jeeps in France. Later that year, the Army announced its intention to keep its stock of World War II Jeeps and commissioned Hotchkiss to produce more under license. The factory in Paris produced only 9,623 Delahaye Jeeps in total, the majority of which were military VLRDs, but a small number of civilian 12-volt variants in the form of the VLR C12 were also produced. Most Delahaye Jeeps served in standard form, like the Hotchkiss M201, but like the Hotchkiss, some were armored, converted for radio, or even used as weapons carriers. When compared to the plentiful supply of cheap or surplus Jeeps, the civilian version proved too expensive to be popular. Hotchkiss would face the same issue later when it came to finding a market for the civilian version of the M201. The M201 Jeep used by the French military was available in two variants, the standard Jeep and the Sahara. From 1954 to 1962, France was engaged in Algeria's independence war. The Sahara model was designed for use in northern Africa, which is dominated by the Sahara Desert, where the French army established military bases and test facilities for special weapons, rockets, and the development of nuclear weapons. The Sahara had a reinforced chassis, firmer rear springs, an additional toolbox under the front grille, improved intake air filtration, and a second fuel tank beneath the passenger seat. Only 400 were built, initially with 6-volt and then 24-volt electrical systems. The French army stayed in the Sahara after the war until 1967 to operate the test facilities. The Sahara Jeeps were returned to France after that. Only a few Sahara Jeeps survive today. Although the Hotchkiss-Willys agreement was started in 1952 and originally intended to include the manufacture in France of a Jeep based on the Willys CJ2B design, it took until 1954 to reach an agreement with Willys, which was then owned by the Kaiser Corporation. Kaiser and Hotchkiss then decided to replace the CJ2B with the CJ2B, which had only recently begun production in the United States. This Jeep, designated the JH101, was designed for the French civilian market. Hotchkiss opted to place the Go Devil engine and the MB's gearbox in the JH101 because they were already constructing the MB at the same plant. The F-head engine and Warner gearbox were available as options, and most customers requested the F-head when placing their orders. The body tub, including fenders, hood, and grille, and the frame and axles, were identical to the CJ2B. The first true year of production of the JH101 in France was 1955. 70 JH101 were produced in Saint-Denis, near Paris, with all parts coming from the United States. Between 1955 and 1960, Hotchkiss built 3,496 JH101. Attempts to sell the JH101 in the civilian market never took off due to its high price and a lack of a suitable dealer network. In 1960, the JH101 was replaced by the JH102, which featured a few changes to the bell housing, motor mounts, and electrical system. The smaller headlights on the JH102 are one of the primary recognition differences between the two variants. In 1962, Hotchkiss introduced the Peugeot diesel engine. This engine lacked sufficient power and was not well received. Hotchkiss produced 1,041 JH102s and 93 JH102Ds before ending manufacturing in 1966. In 1963, Hotchkiss introduced the HWL, a 100 inches wheelbase variant of the JH102, to take the place of the CJ6 on the French market. The CJ6 was deemed too expensive to import into France or to produce locally, since new tooling was required. Both gasoline and diesel engines were available. The diesel version was designated as HWLD. There was a high, long soft top, a short half-cab soft top, and two hard tops available, one steel, the other fiberglass. Only 730 HWLs and 43 HWLDs were produced in France from 1963 to 1966, the last year of production for CJ2B look-alike Jeeps. This was not really surprising given that the designs were technologically obsolete. Hotchkiss ceased vehicle production in 1970, and all tooling and machinery used in the production of the JH and HWL were sold to a company in Spain. In 1972, the company was renamed Thompson Brandt. Hotchkiss, like so many other well-known automobile manufacturers, had finally vanished. Mahindra has made Jeeps under agreements with every one of the many companies that have owned the Jeep brand. That's nearly 75 years of making Jeeps. Click here to view the amazing Mahindra story.